Welcome to another edition of the Star Local Media Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch. I'm the sports editor with Star Local Media, and I am being joined by Brian Murphy, sports editor for our papers in Frisco, Little Elm, and Salina, as well as Taylor Ragland, who does sports for Plano, Allen, and Lake Cities. And gentlemen, let's answer a couple more questions. For the last time this summer, we're going to pull two entries from our ongoing summer question series and preview a couple different subplots heading into the upcoming high school sports year. Today's question, we are going to examine some first-year head coaches. That's always a fascinating subplot every offseason. We've always got tons of coaching turnover within our markets, and every coaching situation is different and whatnot. So obviously we can't get to all of them. You know, there's too many to name. But we're gonna just discuss some of the ones that kind of jump off the page to us for whatever reason, and just in a variety of our markets. Brian, we were just discussing a couple of the ones in your neck of the woods. As far as the coaching turnover in Frisco ISD, Little Elm, what have you. What is one that has just kind of jumped off the page in the for the coming school year?
The biggest one is at Wakeland, the girls' soccer job. Sid Corey retires like 2 minutes after he wins the state title. He's crying and sobbing on the sideline. I'm trying to get him.
Was it known going in that he was going to retire?
Yeah. So it was kind of a thing, and it was building up throughout the playoffs. Yeah. And I was asking people around Wakeland. I was like, man, is he going to retire? Like kind of off the record type stuff. I was like, what's the deal? Is he going to retire? Because I'm hearing all this buzz about him retiring. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, it could be. They don't want to say it. I don't obviously. And then leading up to the state tournament, the semifinal game, it was becoming more of a realistic option for him. And then after they won the state title, I asked him, after the big mob scene on the sideline, he's crying, everyone's hugging him. And I'm like, Coach, are you retiring? Is this your last game? Because I heard him say something in his little post-game speech, and he said, yeah, this is my last game I'll ever coach. And I was like, all right, this is going to be some big shoes to fill.
Heck of a way to go out.
Heck of a way to go out. And so they didn't venture too far to find his replacement in Jimmy Langford from Little Elm. He's won a state championship 3 times. He won in 06 with McKinney North, and he won it twice with McKinney Boyd in 08 and 2011, all girls soccer there. So he's got the pedigree, he's got the state championship experience, and he's returning a bulk of their lineup. Majority of that team last year were juniors. So he's handed it to him on a silver platter to win another championship for Class 5A again.
That's it's pretty much the ideal situation. Getting to step right into the shoes of. It's not like there was any, because every coaching situation is different as far as the turnover goes. It wasn't like Coach Corey was failing to live up to expectations and whatnot, and they're just parting ways and then leaving a coach to kind of try to pick up the scraps and regroup. No, he gets to take over a team that was the absolute pinnacle of 5A girls soccer in Texas. I believe that Wakeland girls soccer was one of, I believe, only 2 jobs for where the new coach is going to inherit a defending state champion. The other being Allen boys basketball. This one was actually a little surprising when it first came down. 6-7 weeks or so. Allen boys basketball won their first ever state championship. Earlier this year. They did so on the back of a pretty significant senior class, and then word came down. I want to say it was like May, June, but that Jeff McCullough, Allen's head coach over the previous 6 years or so, he was going to be taking a job on the administrative side of things within Allen ISD. It wasn't a kind of a spur of the moment thing. This was something that had been in the back of his mind for a while, transitioning to the administrative side. Once again, getting to exit on a state championship note, much like Sid Corey did. So but they're not much like that. They didn't have to really look far to find his replacement. His replacement is actually his brother, who is the assistant coach, Joe McCullough, and he inherits a team that it's a bit of a different situation than Langford has over at Wakeland. Allen graduates. Allen graduated 4 of its 5 starters from that state championship team. They returned really just maybe 2 players that saw significant, meaningful minutes during their championship run. Obviously, Isaiah Stevens, one of the best just pound for pound shooters in the Metroplex, and Corey Jones, who was kind of their 6th, 7th man, depending on the matchup. But it's Allen. You assume that they should have. The cupboard's not exactly going to be bare as far as talent goes. But at the same time, that's a program that Jeff McCullough really did a pretty commendable job of putting on the map. It was when Coach McCullough was hired back in 2013, I want to say, Allen hadn't won a playoff game yet in the UIL's largest classification. and then they were able to do that. They advanced to the state tournament that same year, and from that point on, I mean, they've, obviously they won a state championship this year. They've been in the state tournament twice, went to the regional tournament 4 times. I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find too many programs within the past 6 years that have done more winning than, in the postseason at least, than Allen. So it's certainly some pretty big shoes for Joe McCullough to fill.
Now, was he going to move on if they had won the state championship or not? Say had they been booted in the first round, was he going to stick around?
I honestly don't know. That's it. I mean, he at the very least, that's why I say this. The administrative thing wasn't just kind of out of left field. He did have his eye on this as far as being the next step in his career. It could have very well been just the timing was perfect, and it's just an opportunity opened up that because I do think that at least as I kind of recount my interview with him, that the opportunity did kind of come. Like, so he had this in mind as far as his next step, but as far as the actual opening, that kind of materialized kind of on the fly, and it was a pretty fast-moving process. So everything just happened to kind of fall into place for Jeff McCullough. But yeah, I mean, a situation where obviously there's a championship standard there now, and it'll be on Joe McCullough to keep that ship going. Taylor, what is one coach opening that is a coach hire, I should say?
Perfect. Two perfect segues actually, because I'm going to go to Allen and I'm going to go to another soccer coach who has 3 state championships under her belt. The Allen girls soccer team, Kevin Alberry, kind of a similar situation, I guess. Not moving up to an administrative role, but stepping down and wanting to take some more time with his family, kind of step back from the commitment of coaching a varsity 6A program and go to the JV team and still be a part of the program, but not in the highest capacity.
That is still pretty unique when you have the varsity coach step down to coach the JV. But yeah, it was largely because of just wanted to balance quality of life with still being able to coach. He loves coaching, but
he didn't want to leave the program, didn't want to not be a part of it and be around the players and all that kind of stuff, but just kind of taking a reduced role. And they'll bring in Allen alum Kelly Thompson from Ursuline, where I mentioned 3 state titles. Not consecutive or anything, but still impressive. She wasn't there very long and had 3 state titles, and comes over to Allen and inherits a good situation, much like at Wakeland. Not a defending state champion, but a defending regional finalist, a regional finalist, regional final appearance. So she inherits a young team. I think it's a better situation probably than Allen boys basketball, even though they can reload a little bit better than other schools, just because they have such a plethora of talented athletes and people that can take over. I think Kelly Thompson inherits a good situation in that that regional final team doesn't lose a whole lot. So she's got that winning pedigree, like you talked about, going on over there at Wakeland, and she's certainly proven that she knows what it takes to win a championship, at least at the TAPS level. So coming in, and I think it was another situation where it just kind of fell into place. It seems like she had already moved to the district, correct?
Yeah, she was already going to teach in Allen ISD.
Yeah, and was kind of just keeping her ear to the ground for an opening, and then it all just kind of fell into place where Alberry wanted to step down.
Wasn't in line to be a coach at all.
No, she moved into the district to teach, and in the future, I believe she wanted to be a coach.
because Albury had kind of intimated, again, this is something that had been in the works. He had talked to the athletics department, Steve Williams and Kim Gardner, and just let them know this is what I kind of want.
I'm thinking about.
Yeah, this is what I'm thinking about. If you find somebody who you think would work as far as a replacement,
Yeah, so she didn't move with the immediate intention of, okay, here I am at coaching Allen's girls soccer team, but it kind of, again, just kind of the stars all aligned, and I think Allen got a good one, and a coach that should allow them to continue the run of success for sure. So I think that definitely the 3 coaches we've talked about are set up for pretty good runs and in pretty good positions when they take over their new gigs.
It's always neat when we have just coaching switches within markets, because like you mentioned, Jimmy Langford comes from Little Elm to Wakeland, so the natural question is then what happened to Little Elm girls soccer and how will they reload?
Well, they bring in Abilene Wiley's head coach from the last 9 years, Luis Manuel Cordova. He posted a 108, 48, and 8 record over those last 9 seasons. 4 district titles, 7 playoff appearances, 3 trips to the regional tournament. They bring back, lots and lots of all-district talent. I could read off all the names, but I don't think we have enough time. The majority of their team were sophomores and juniors, so they're set, and they're in good hands with Cordova coming in from Abilene.
And that actually kind of it just dawned on me. I didn't even have this name down on my list, and it just happened to slip my mind when we talk about just intermarket coaching changes. We actually did have one within Plano from the public school level to the private school level with Jeff Clarkson, who had coached at Plano East for the last handful of years, going to coach Prestonwood Christian, one of the, maybe the top, private schools destination as far as boys basketball goes. Clarkson, he was a Plano East alum. He came up, I want to say 2012 might have been his first year, and that was a team. He inherited a team that was, that hadn't made the playoffs the year before, but you could tell the talent was there, and then he immediately kind of put his stamp on things, took them to the regional semifinals. One of the more just on sheer talent, one of the better basketball teams that PISD has had over the last 10, 15 years. And then, that program was always just a consistent, playoff participant. They did have a, district championship team in 2015, 2016, in that neighborhood that went to the third round. And but now, he inherits a Prestonwood situation where, Prestonwood Christian, they just had a run of, I want to say it was 6 consecutive state championships.
It's state or bust over there, basically.
There might not be a private school where the sport has a state championship expectation to the level of Prestonwood. You're talking, this is the program that's had, Julius Randle, Zach Peters, at one time Mickey Mitchell, Snyder Herard. They've just always had just these nationally ranked Titans. And although it's going to be a bit of a different situation because Prestonwood's best returner, Justin Webster, he transferred to a military academy. I want to say out in Virginia. So it's going to be we'll have to regroup as far as finding because Justin Webster was started for this team as a freshman. It's about to enter his senior year, so you're having to replace some pretty big shoes to fill. That's an all-state first-team participant, and a quality, but still, a quality situation. Just any way you slice it. One of the other basketball situations that kind of jumped out, Plano West hired just its third ever girls basketball coach this past off season, which is, I think that says something. A program that's almost 20 years old and it's only on its third head coach, and they've kind of kept a pretty similar pattern as far as the trajectory goes. You had Don Patterson, with all the success that he accomplished, and then when he retired, Kristen Perry, who was his top assistant, she took over, and she took over the program 5 years ago. I really should have this stuff in front of me. I don't remember too much off the top of my head. And then she moved on and took an assistant principal job in Frisco ISD, and then her top assistant, Kristen Grassi, got promoted to fill that spot this past off season, and she inherits a program that missed the playoffs last year, a rare missed postseason appearance for the Lady Wolves, but again, lots of just a program that is steeped in winning tradition. They had a run of just a ridiculous number of consecutive district championships. They went to the state tournament back in 2014. Once again, I'm trying to remember these years off the top of my head. And yet she has at her disposal one of the very best players in the nation in Jaden Owens, and that'll certainly help ease the transition for a new head coach when you get to inherit a team that already has one of the nation's top prospects. As far as from a football standpoint, we had just because it's football, why not mention, we had I believe 5 new head coaches within our coverage areas. We had Marcus Shavers at McKinney, Isaiah Young taking over R.L. Turner, Kenneth Gilchrist, who you can comment on in a bit, Brian, taking over Frisco Heritage, Scott Smith, not the Plano West Scott Smith, a different Scott Smith, taking over the job at Frisco Legacy Christian, Tim Cedar taking over the job at North Mesquite, and Stephen Greek moving from Prestonwood Christian as their offensive coordinator and now the head coach at Argyle Liberty Christian. Brian, talk a little about the hiring of Kenneth Gilchrist and just what that does for the Frisco Heritage football program.
Yeah, well, Che Hendricks, he left back in the middle of the season in Central Texas near Austin. I was blanking on the high school he went to, but Kenneth Gilchrist comes from Whitney, program where he turned around down there in 3A. He loses a quarterback in Amari Jones, who's probably the most dynamic high school player that I've seen out of Frisco. Yes, that's included with MJ Rivers and Jason Shelley. Amari Jones is that good, who's going to Tulane next year, but he has a transfer coming in Jason Falkenberry from Godley High School. Had never heard of Godley before Falkenberry transferred. He hired Falkenberry's dad to become an assistant, so along comes Jason, and he's an all-state quarterback at that level, first team all-district, all-county QB, on and on and on and on. He's 6'3", 220, everything you want in a prototypical quarterbacks. So Heritage could shake things up with with Gilchrist at the helm and a new quarterback in Falconberry.
One of the other situations that jumps off, and we've alluded to this one previously on the podcast, but I'm just fascinated to see what happens with McKinney under Marcus Shavers. This was a McKinney team that, last year was as good a year as they've had in the past decade. Going 7-4, snapping a 9-year playoff drought. But at the same time, as we've mentioned, they did lose a lot of senior talent from that team. They lost their entire starting offense, the majority of their defense. But when you look at what Shavers did in his previous stop at Lubbock Estacado, you talk about just making an immediate impact. That Estacado team was 2-8 before Shavers got his hands on them, and then he was there for just 2 seasons. But in those 2 seasons, they went from 2-8 to 8-4 and 10-2. So an immediate turnaround, and so we'll see. Obviously, competing in Class 6A and District 9 6A, it's not going to be the most forgiving of districts, and it's a bit of a different deck to work with because again, he's going to have to acclimate a lot of kids who are not exactly accustomed to the varsity spotlight, much like their predecessors were. But when you have a unique situation like that, plus with the instant impact that Shavers was able to make at his previous stop, McKinney is definitely a team that'll be on my radar. Taylor, anybody else that jumped off the page during the offseason to you?
Yeah, there were a couple names. At Lovejoy, Brittany Lee will take over the softball program. I think that's another situation where first-year head coach is going to get to step in and have basically the ideal situation. Lovejoy is always good. They always have talent coming through the pipeline. So I think that's a really great situation. It's her first head coaching job. She was an assistant at Coppell for, I think, a season. Not very long. Not very far removed from college herself and college softball at Stephen F. Austin. So her first head coaching job and a pretty ideal situation to take over the Lady Leopards there and have that kind of talent and that kind of pedigree. Then also Katie Madison at Lake Dallas will take over, another assistant jumping into the head coaching role. Jonathan Lee departed for one of the new Frisco schools. I want to say Lebanon Trail?
I believe so.
Is that correct? I think so, yeah. Departed for Lebanon Trail, will coach over there, and Madison, his assistant, will jump up to be the head coach at Lake Dallas. And I think that's another program maybe not quite as well set up as some of these other ones, but another program that I think could have some success and definitely has some building blocks for at least a postseason bid, I would think, in her first year. And she's obviously very familiar. She's been in Lake Dallas, the school district in general, forever, coaching through the middle school ranks, and is really familiar with the players and all that sort of thing and what they have coming up, which is probably going to help her. So I think another situation where not a guarantee, but I would expect a competitive year and a potential postseason appearance from the Lady Falcons under her.
You mentioned softball, Brian. You actually just had an interesting softball hire out in Prosper, a story that you're going to actually have in this week's edition of the Salina Record. Talk a little bit about that, just that unique hiring.
So Stacy Jackson announces her resignation, a few weeks ago. She led Lady Eagles to a 14-0 record in softball this past year, their best season in school history. 3 rounds deep in the playoffs. They had the most dominant pitcher. Now they're making the move to 6A, so it makes sense. Stick around. She's turned this program around. Not that it was a struggling program before, but now they're making the move to 6A. Stick with Jackson. The majority of your team are sophomores and juniors, young players that have only been with you as a head coach for their entire high school career. A good core returning. And then she picks a totally different career field in sales. And so the assistant coach, Todd Rainwater, who up until about 5 or so years ago wasn't coaching at all as a full-time career position. He was in law enforcement. He was working in jails. He was patrolling the streets in squad cars. He was investigating murders, investigating burglaries, all kinds of crazy stuff. And he's like, man, I want to still be a coach. That was his passion since he was 18. He played baseball in college. And so he said he told his wife one day, he's like, well, not just one day, but it was leading up to it, but finally told her one day, he's like, I can't keep doing this. So in his early 40s, he's like, I'm gonna try and be a coach. So Prosper opened up a law enforcement curriculum with law enforcement classes, forensic science, stuff like that, stuff that he could teach. So he jumped on that opportunity. He landed that, and then he went straight to the coaching the teams at Prosper, and then he became an assistant on the football team. And so he told me he closed his squad car on a Sunday and was on the field on that Monday, the following day, less than 24 hours later, coaching 2 days in football for Prosper. And then that led him into softball as an assistant. 2 years into that, he became the varsity assistant under Jackson. And then she resigns, and then they have this big hole to fill at head coach. And the obvious answer to that vacancy was right in front of them in Rainwater, and they made the hire, and from patrolling the streets to coaching a 6A up-and-coming powerhouse in softball. It's a crazy story. And that'll be in this Friday's edition of Salina and First Go Enterprise as well.
You mentioned him taking over a team that is in such a good spot from a development standpoint. And that can also affect, just as far as kind of how to gauge which coaching situations stand to, I guess, maybe have a bit more first-year success than others. Same case for just simply moving into a district that maybe benefits your sport a bit more than another, because I'm looking at a couple ones kind of out in the, Denton County ways where, you have some new hires at Coppell and Flower Mound. And when you factor in being in a new district like 6A, where for most of the sports, it's expected that, Louisville ISD and Coppell are going to occupy most of those playoff spots, which should, help kind of ease the transition for some coaches like Clint Schnell, who takes over for Coppell boys basketball, a program that actually could be set up to potentially contend for a district championship. They have already got a pretty consistent playoff history. They've made the playoffs 9 of the past 10 years. And Clint Schnell has familiarity with the program itself, not the varsity level, but he was their freshman coach for a while before he took a job at Arlington Martin prior to coming back to Coppell to coach the varsity level. And he's got, some pretty impressive talent waiting in the wings. Quavian Adger, who was named the sophomore of the year out of 9-6A last year. Tarika Mon, KJ Liggins, a star on the football team, also does the same on the basketball court. That's a program that you're stepping right in and you expect to compete for a playoff berth right out of the gates. Ditto for Flower Mound volleyball, where Jamie Siegel takes over from Marcy Laraquente, who I believe went down to Westlake, went down to the Austin area to continue coaching. But that's another program with a consistent playoff history. It made the playoffs 6 of the past 7 years, and just Louisville ISD is never lacking in volleyball talent, evidenced by what Hebron's done. Flower Mound's been a part of that equation with some pretty significant playoff runs in recent memory. They've got some strong talent there, players like Kaylee Cox, Sarah Martinez, Emily Merrick, and it's a situation that, again, much like the Coppell one, because of the district they're in, you would expect that Coach Siegel's going to be able to step right in and make an immediate impact. Let's see. That's so that's a look at just a few of the notable first-year head coaches within some of our markets. We've got one more question on the docket, and we will get to that one right after a word from this sponsor. Today's Student Athlete Spotlight is brought to you by Bavarian Grill, authentic Bavarian food and beer garden. Listed by the Zagat survey as the highest rated German restaurant in Texas for 12 years in a row. 12 years! That's 3 presidential terms. You can enjoy traditional and authentic spring favorites now. Everything from appetizers like slow roasted ham hock and potato pancakes to entrees like bratwurst or breaded schnitzel. Bring your whole family for lunch and dinner. They are open Tuesday through Saturday, located off Parker and Highway 75 in Plano. Bavarian Grill. And now, let's get back to the podcast. And let's round this out with one more entry from our summer question series before we bid this concept for the podcast adieu for the summer. We've got something else in mind for the rest of the summer, and we will touch on that at a future date. But for now, I remember on a previous entry we discussed some teams that didn't make the playoffs that we thought could potentially make the playoffs in 2018-19. We're going to take that same idea, except kind of take a bit of a more extreme spin on it. Look at teams that finished last place in their respective districts that could potentially make the playoffs for this coming season. So not exactly a worst to first story, but that nice middle ground of being able to go from just a real strong bounce back for being able to finish, last place one year and then be among the top 4 in your district the next. Brian, where did you land on this one?
The Reedy boys basketball team was probably the most unlucky team of all time.
Wow.
At least in Frisco boys basketball.
That's emphatic.
That's a huge walk back you just made there. You went from the most unlucky team of all time to in Frisco boys basketball
I had to build you up and really back down.
You really cut the sample size.
So, all right. Let me backtrack a little bit. So they ended the year 1-13 in district playing. You look at that and you're like, yuck. And, they're not built for success in the coming years. But 5 of their losses were by 9 points or less. You're like, okay, they weren't going to win all 5 of those. It's 9 points is a lot of points in basketball. 4 of those were by 1 field goal or less. 2 or 1 points were their losses. They had gut-wrenching losses to Frisco, gut-wrenching losses to Wakeland, to Centennial, literally by 1 point. And I'm looking at this, and I saw them play against Lone Star, one of the top boys basketball teams in the district, and I'm like, man, Reedy's not that bad. And,
not 1-13
no,
bad.
They're not 1-13. And they didn't get slaughtered by Lone Star, a team that finished the top of the district, a team that had a lot of senior talent, a lot of talent just in general. They just weren't that bad. They have a good coach in John Youngblood. They have a good core returning. It was their first year of varsity basketball with seniors. So, they're still going through growing pains, at Reedy. This year, not only will I think they'll be much improved, but I think they'll be somewhere in that mix for the 4 seed-ish, somewhere in that middle ground in the Frisco district in boys basketball. They returned 8 players that were juniors last year. They're going to be seniors this year. So guys that that they got kicked while they were down, and they got that much needed experience, and they'll be back. I think they'll have their breakout year on the hardwood this year.
Taylor, where did you land on this hypothetical? Was your last place finisher that you could see potentially making a run to the playoffs?
It was difficult looking at District 8-5A because where a lot of those teams kind of came from, it was very much a melting pot of a couple districts that make up the new 8-5A. And where a lot of those teams come from, they were all pretty middling. In 14-5A, it was usually the Carrollton schools finishing in the cellar and one of them finishing last place. And so in the other district where the Denton schools came from, it was usually Sherman or Denison finishing last place, not the Denton schools. Even though, Braswell had a little bit of a rougher time just being kind of a newer program and all that kind of stuff. But really there weren't a lot of teams that finished last that are now in 8-5A. So where I eventually landed was a team we don't cover but will now that they're in 8-5A in Justin Northwest softball. And my reasoning is basically, they went 2-12 last year. I don't know a ton about everybody they have coming back and how good they'll be, but I think just in general, 8-5A softball is a little more wide open than a lot of districts. You'll have the Colony at the top. Obviously, I think they'll probably be the district champion, either them or Denton Ryan. Denton Ryan is a really good softball power too. So those two will likely slug it out for the title. Little Elm and Lake Dallas, Little Elm a little bit more, should be pretty good, kind of coming up a little bit. Lake Dallas is young and could take a step forward, but beyond those 4 teams and even putting Little Elm and Lake Dallas kind of in the bubble, it's pretty wide open. The other 2 Denton schools aren't great. Northwest obviously had a down year finishing last, but it's one of those cases where it's a smaller district. There's a lot of parity beyond the Colony and Denton Ryan. So I've seen crazier things happen. I've seen teams miss the playoffs and teams make the playoffs that shouldn't and shouldn't have already just in my time here. So it's not a huge stretch, I guess, to imagine Lake Dallas or Little Elm or somebody slipping up and letting a team like Northwest sneak in. So really kind of by default almost, just because like I said, there weren't a lot of last place finishers coming into this district. It's a district with a lot of parity in a lot of different sports, just because everybody was kind of in the middle of their districts last year.
Brian, one thing you mentioned about how Reedy was just flat unlucky a lot of times, and that's kind of a nice segue to a note that Justin Thomas, our Denton County sports editor, passed along as far as a team that's kind of on his radar for this hypothetical. Hebron girls basketball kind of fell into that same pretense last year. It's not like win here there would have been the difference between a playoff berth or not, but this team did finish last, but they did have a lot of really close losses against some of the better teams in the district. But their big thing heading into this season is they have their entire team back. Literally, they did not have a single senior on last year's team, and you factor in you just saw what happened with a team like Plano Senior and what that was able to do for them. And obviously, I'm not projecting a state championship or anything here, but as far as what that continuity can mean for a team that just kind of gets to grow up an extra year together, and just team that was kind of went through the fire of some tough setbacks, maybe winning some more of those close games that kind of got away from them last season. So yeah, they're going to have their entire team back. They could have actually on paper one of the better backcourts in the entire district with Sierra Dixon and Deja Melton, and that's again another one of those situations where being in a district where it's expected that the Louisville ISD schools and Coppell should compete for those top 5 spots, and we'll see. Irving MacArthur's a strong program traditionally. They might have a say in this as well, but there's at least a roadmap there for this Hebron team to potentially get back to the postseason after finishing last in 5-6A last year. And then my actual selection for this was actually the only, as far as I can tell, the only athletics program or team, I should say, that has blocked me on Twitter, unfortunately. Plano West boys soccer. No hard feelings. No hard feelings to the Wolves. Nothing but love over here. But Plano West boys soccer fell on some tough times last year. I mean, they were a little kind of inconsistent as far as their results go. They tied for last place in 6-6A, went 3-9-2 in the district, and this was a program that had made the playoffs for the previous 4 years, and they advanced 3 rounds deep twice within that span. So it was very kind of a year that was a little bit out of left field for the Wolves, so to speak. They, there is enough tradition there, at least recently, as from. And where you feel like they should be able to right the ship. One of the things that is before West kind of got hot in recent years with winning district championships and making significant playoff runs, their big bugaboo was just having a tough time scoring. They at least as far as I can recall some interviews years ago with former head coach now Jimmy Dowell, is that they lacked the true forwards, guys who were just natural goal scoring forwards, and they're having to kind of play some kids out of position just to fit those roles. Right. But yeah, it's Plano West again. It's a program that is steeped in tradition. They are under a new head coach, Brendan Satcher, making the move from Frisco Independence to take over the Wolves, and that's a situation there just based on their just previous pedigree. I think they're a potential bounce back candidate in District 9-6A this coming year.
Now, why did you get blocked, or is that a segment for a
I have no idea. I think maybe if I had to pinpoint one thing, I think when we did our pre-district predictions, when we predict the order of finish, because I don't let any of us run from our ballots. I post the individual ballots alongside the the aggregate stuff on our website, and I believe on my individual ballot I actually might have picked them to finish last. So if I had to guess, that was it, but who knows? I think I'm a pretty nice kind young man on Twitter.
So
but
they blocked you before the season even began when they saw
at least
or did they block you after they finished last?
I think it was right. We were trying to.
I don't want to say the same word.
We were trying to find the result from one of their matches. It would just we were just trying to update our the playbook or whatnot, and we just couldn't find the score of theirs. So naturally, let's check the Twitter feed. Those they always update it with the results, and I couldn't. I said, Taylor, can you? I just couldn't access it. Like I was trying to type in the the Twitter handle, and it wouldn't come up like under the search results. And that's weird. So then I went and under Google and just searched Plano West boys basketball, boys soccer, I should say, Twitter, and then just clicked on the what their Twitter handle is, and then they got the big old block screen. So and then
there you go, man.
So,
we'll never know the full story.
I know. Mystery for the ages. So, but yeah, that's a look at a few teams that that fell on some tough times last year, finished last in their respective districts, but could be in for some brighter prospects in 2018-19, and that shall conclude this edition of the Star Local Media Sports Podcast. Taylor, Brian, appreciate y'all for tagging along. We'll be back on Monday to round out our 3-part series on the Varsity Awards. We'll be discussing some of our selections for. You know what? I'll reveal it on Monday. Everybody, you guys, folks, enjoy the rest of your week, and we will talk to y'all later.